Don Diego Hernandez, Doña Carmen's son, Holy Mother of God. Is it really you? The older woman crossed herself as Diego took off his dark glasses, revealing the same honey-colored eyes he had inherited from his mother. The lobby of the Hotel Valencia, once a dilapidated mansion where he worked as a teenager carrying suitcases, now gleamed with Italian marble floors. Even though I'm not the kid you knew anymore. Diego's Italian heels echoed against the floor as he followed the old housekeeper. Doña Josefina, 20 years, 2 decades since he left San Miguel de Allende with nothing more than a backpack and the promise to return as someone. Now the owner of a hotel chain. He was back for something more valuable than gold, an answer. The town hadn't changed as much as he had. The same cobblestone streets. The same impossibly blue sky. The same church where Maria Elena and he used to meet after Mass. Maria Elena. Her name still caused a lump in his throat. Your suite is ready, Don Diego. Josefina extended an old key. Not a magnetic card. Some things resisted modernity. Do you need anything else? Diego stopped in front of the window. From there, he could see the flower shop that once belonged to his mother. A young woman was arranging the buckets of roses at the entrance. Something in her way of moving, in the natural grace of her gestures, felt strangely familiar. The flower shop is still in the Torres family? No, sir. Now Lucia, your mother's granddaughter, runs it. Diego turned abruptly. My mother's granddaughter? But I'm an only child. Josefina paled as if she had said too much. Oh, I'm sorry. I misspoke. The adopted one. I mean, Doña Carmen adopted her years ago. When you were gone. The young woman outside laughed while wrapping a bouquet. Her smile, visible even from the distance, caused in Diego a unease he couldn't explain. And Maria Elena? The question came out before he could contain it. Maria Elena Suarez? Josefina wrung her hands in her apron. She married Don Diego. To Ricardo Montero. From the bank. The weight of those words hit him harder than any failed business deal. He had prepared for many possibilities. But not this. Maria Elena married. The same Maria Elena who swore she would always wait for him. Thank you, Josefina. You may retire. Alone in the suite, Diego loosened his silk tie and poured himself a whiskey. The amber liquid reflected the San Miguel sunset, painting golden shadows on the walls. He had come back seeking answers. But every step seemed to bring more questions. His phone vibrated. Another email about hotel expansion. But his eyes remained fixed on the flower shop. On the young woman who was now closing the store. On the way she tilted her head. Identical to his mother's. What did I miss? Mom? He murmured toward the purple horizon. What else is this town hiding from me? The parish clock struck 6. Its chimes echoing as they had 20 years ago. Diego Hernandez had returned home. But something told him the real journey was just beginning. The Ramirez bakery smelled exactly the same as it had 20 years ago, of fresh sweet bread and café de olla. Roberto, now with premature gray hairs and an apron stained with flour, almost dropped the tray of conchas when he saw Diego enter. Cabron, look at you. The two men embraced, erasing 2 decades of absence. Diego felt something loosen in his chest for the first time since his return. A genuine smile crossed his face. And that belly. Roberto, no one can tell you no to the Balilas now. Privileges of being the owner. Gooey. Sit down. I'll bring you a coffee and you can tell me what brings you back here. Diego settled into one of the Formica tables. The same ones where they had studied for their high school exams. The television in the corner was broadcasting local news. And some customers were glancing at him, whispering, "Is it true about Maria Elena?" he asked bluntly when Roberto returned with 2 steaming mugs. Roberto sighed, wiping his hands on his apron. Yes, she married Ricardo about 15 years ago. But, Diego, it's not what you think. That marriage, we all know it's not. Roberto stopped as Lucia entered. Tio Roberto, do you have the conchas that my tia Maria Elena ordered? Diego froze. Under the morning light, the resemblance was even more evident. The young woman had her mother's gestures. But something in her gaze. In the shape of her jaw. Lucia, I'd like you to meet Diego Hernandez. An old friend. The girl looked at him with curiosity. Doña Carmen's son? She spoke a lot about you. You knew my mother well? The question came out more brusquely than intended. She practically raised me. Lucia smiled nostalgically. She was an extraordinary woman. Roberto observed the exchange with an indecipherable expression. Lucia, why don't you take these conchas to your aunt? Tell her they're complimentary. When the young woman left, Diego turned to his friend. Roberto, what's going on here? That girl. It's not my place to tell you. Brother. Roberto got up to attend to other customers. But if I were you, I'd talk to Maria Elena. There are things you need to know. Diego remained seated for a long time, the coffee cooling in front of him. Through the window, he saw Lucia cross the square with the box of bread. The way she walked, that slight sway, was like seeing his mother as a young woman. His cell phone vibrated in his pocket. Another message from his partners in Mexico City about the hotel expansion. But for the first time in years, business seemed insignificant. He had come back looking for his first love. And instead, he was finding mysteries that were shaking the foundations of his world. Town, he murmured, leaving a bill under the mug. You're still keeping secrets. Outside, the mid-morning sun gilded the domes of the parish, and the aroma of sweet bread followed him as he walked like a ghost from his youth. Refusing to let him go. I can't take it anymore. Maria Elena. Ricardo? He loosened his bank tie, his eyes fixed on the untouched coffee. 20 years waiting for you to love me. Like I love you. Not anymore. Maria Elena watched her husband from across the breakfast table. The wrinkles around his eyes had deepened with the years, marking every day he had tried to forget Diego. Ricardo, don't even deny it. I saw how you turned when Lucia mentioned he was back. Pale, as if you had seen a ghost. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen curtains, illuminating Ricardo's premature gray hairs. Maria Elena felt the weight of guilt crushing her. That she had accepted raising as her own a daughter that wasn't hers. That she never questioned his weekly visits to Doña Carmen. That she pretended not to hear her cry at night. Do you know why we never had children of our own, Ricardo? He continued, his voice breaking. Because I knew that every time you looked at a baby, you'd look for his features. The ring of the telephone broke the tension. Maria Elena silently thanked it, until she saw the name on the screen. Lucia. Mom, sorry. Tia Maria Elena? I just saw, it was Diego Hernandez. At the bakery. The world stopped. Maria Elena closed her eyes, trying to control the tremor in her voice. And it was strange. When he looked at me, it was like, I don't know, why did you never tell me you were friends with him? Ricardo got up from the table, shaking his head. I'm going to the bank. And Maria Elena, I think it's time everyone stopped pretending. When the door closed behind him, Maria Elena collapsed onto the chair. 2 decades of lies weighed like lead. Diego had returned, and with him, all the secrets she had so carefully guarded. She went to the cupboard and took out an old box. Inside, a yellowed photograph of her and Diego, both 18, sitting in the plaza gazebo. In her womb, though no one knew it then, Lucia was growing. How do I tell you now? Diego? She whispered to the image. How do I explain to you that that girl you saw at the bakery is your daughter? That your mother helped me protect her. That every time I look at her, I see your eyes. The kitchen clock ticked implacably. Time was passing. Maria Elena knew she should get ready to go to the school where she taught. But her legs refused to respond. Somewhere in town, Diego would be asking questions. And the answers she had kept hidden for so long threatened to destroy the fragile balance of 3 generations. She grabbed her bag and keys. She would have to take the long way to avoid passing in front of the Hotel Valencia. She wasn't ready to see him. Not yet. Not when every beat of her heart still pronounced his name. Not when her daughter was beginning to ask the right questions. Forgive me, Lucia, she murmured, closing the door. Forgive me, Ricardo. Forgive me, Diego. The San Miguel sun shone relentlessly on the cobblestone streets, oblivious to the secrets its inhabitants were guarding so jealously. Why did she never tell me about him? Abuela? It was one of the last memories Lucia had of Doña Carmen, the old woman arranging white roses while she, 15 years old, held a photograph she had found in the attic, a young Diego next to Maria Elena, both smiling in front of the parish. Now, 4 years later, Lucia rearranged the same roses in the flower shop while unanswered questions pursued her. The encounter with Diego at the bakery had stirred something deep, a familiar unease. Good morning, my love. Maria Elena appeared at the door, paler than usual. Do you have red roses? Tia? Why did you never tell me that you knew Diego Hernandez too? Maria Elena almost dropped the flower vase she was holding. We were high school classmates. That's all. Because I found more photos of you both. You know, in Abuela Carmen's box. The silence thickened between them. Outside, the life of the town continued. Vendors hawking wares. Tourists photographing the church. The same old routine. But inside the flower shop, 2 decades of secrets threatened to spill over. My father, Ricardo, saw me born, didn't he? Maria Elena leaned against the counter. Lucia, because I've been doing the math, the dates and the photos. Your wedding, and there's something else. When Diego Hernandez looked at me today, it was like seeing myself in a mirror. A tear rolled down Maria Elena's cheek. Lucia had never seen her cry. Abuela Carmen always said that I looked like her family. We all assumed it was a coincidence, but it's not. Is it? The jingle of the doorbell interrupted them. Diego Hernandez entered, stopping short upon seeing Maria Elena. I came to buy flowers for my mother's tomb. The three of them stood motionless, trapped in a triangle of unspoken truths. Lucia watched as her tia Maria Elena and Diego looked at each other, recognizing in that silent exchange years of contained love, of kept pain. "I'll get the roses," Lucia murmured, escaping into the storage room. But she stopped behind the curtain, listening. "You look beautiful," Diego whispered. "Don't do this, please." "Do what? Seek answers? Understand why my mother adopted a girl without telling me? Why that girl has my smile? It's mine, isn't it? Lucia is my daughter?" The sound of flower pots falling made them both turn. Lucia was in the doorway of the storage room, red roses scattered at her feet like drops of blood on the terracotta floor. I just wanted to know who I was," she whispered, before running out of the shop. The echo of her steps on the stones mingled with the sound of the church bells while San Miguel de Allende kept one less secret in its centuries-old streets. "Lucia, wait," Maria Elena tried to follow her, but Diego stopped her by the arm. "Let her go. She needs time." His voice sounded hoarse, like "I need explanations." The flower shop fell silent, interrupted only by the hum of the ceiling fan. The red roses remained scattered on the floor, their aroma mingling with the weight of 2 decades of secrets. "Ricardo knows, doesn't he?" Diego asked, releasing her gently. "He always knew." Maria Elena started picking up the fallen flowers, more to keep her hands busy than from necessity. "He married me knowing I was pregnant with your child. He gave her his last name. He gave Lucia a father. Why didn't you look for me? Why didn't my own mother tell me anything? Look for you when you were building your empire in the capital? Your mother found me crying in the church. She proposed the plan. She would adopt Lucia officially. She would give her my maiden name. Nobody would ask questions in a small town. Gossip dies if it has nothing to feed on." The sound of heels interrupted the conversation. Josefina, the old housekeeper, appeared at the door. "Don Diego, I'm sorry, but there's an urgent call at the hotel. Your partners." "Not now, Josefina. They insist." "Sir, it's about the expansion." Diego cursed under his breath. "Maria Elena, this isn't over. This will never be over. That's why I married Ricardo. Because he understood that some stories have no ending." When Diego left, Maria Elena allowed herself to collapse behind the counter. The sound of footsteps made her look up. Ricardo was at the door. "I saw Lucia running toward the lookout," he said in a tired voice. "She knows, doesn't she?" Maria Elena nodded. 20 years, Maria Elena. 20 years pretending it was enough that you loved me as a friend. As a partner. But I could never compete with a ghost. And now the ghost has returned." "Ricardo, no, not anymore. This afternoon I'll talk to the lawyer. You deserve to be happy. Maria Elena. And I deserve someone who loves me without reservations." At the hotel, Diego ignored the video conference about investments and permits. His eyes were fixed on a photo on his phone. His mother smiling next to a teenage Lucia at the flower shop. The same Lucia he saw every morning in the mirror. "Don Diego," Josefina insisted. "I told them you were busy. Tell them to cancel everything. There are things more important than hotels and money." At the town's lookout, Lucia watched the sunset, holding the old photograph of her teenage parents. 2 decades of well-intentioned lies were beginning to unravel while San Miguel de Allende kept silent. An eternal witness to impossible loves and postponed truths. "I've already packed the suitcases," Ricardo announced from the bedroom door. "I'll stay at my sister's house until I find an apartment." Maria Elena remained sitting on the edge of the bed, her fingers playing with her wedding ring. The shadows of the sunset painted patterns on the wall, like the same ones they had seen for 15 years of a half-shared life. "I always knew this day would come," Ricardo continued, his voice soft. "Ever since that afternoon at the bank, when you arrived crying, asking for a job, pregnant, scared, but so beautiful, you were my savior." "Ricardo. No, I was a coward. I settled." You kept looking at him. Maria Elena got up, approaching the window. From there, she could see the tower of the parish where, 2 decades ago, she had discovered she was pregnant. "Remember what you told me when I told you the truth?" Ricardo smiled sadly. "It doesn't matter whose child it is. I'll love her as my own." And I did. Maria Elena. Every day of her life. "I know. That's why it hurts so much." A heavy silence filled the room. Down on the street, a group of tourists passed by, laughing. "Lucia came to see me at the bank," Ricardo said after a moment. "She's confused, hurt, but you know what she told me? You will always be my dad. That's worth a lifetime of second places." Maria Elena broke down then, sobbing as she hadn't done in years. Ricardo took a step towards her, but stopped. "Don't cry for me. Cry for yourself. For the wasted time. Diego is here now, and Lucia deserves to know her whole story. How do I explain? How do I justify 20 years of lies with the truth? That you did it for love. To protect our daughter. Because yes, Maria Elena, she is our daughter. Mine by choice. Yours and Diego's by blood, by destiny. Ricardo picked up his suitcases. At the door, he stopped one last time. You know what's most ironic? That in the end, we all kept the secret for love. Doña Carmen, for love of her son and her granddaughter. Me, for love of you and Lucia. You, for love of everyone. And now it's time for love to stop hiding. When the door closed behind Ricardo, Maria Elena took the box of memories out of the closet. Photos. Letters. Lucia's first little shoe. The last letter from Doña Carmen before she died. Someday. Daughter, when the time is right, the truth will set you all free. The clock struck midnight. Somewhere in San Miguel, Diego and Lucia would also be awake, struggling with their own demons, searching for answers in the darkness. Maria Elena took her phone and, for the first time in 20 years, dialed the number she had never forgotten. Diego, we need to talk, the three of us. Positive. Maria Elena remembered that moment as if it were yesterday. The pregnancy test shaking in her hands in the high school bathroom. Tears mixing with the August sweat. Diego had been in Mexico City for 3 weeks, chasing dreams bigger than their teenage love. You had to tell him. Her best friend Laura had insisted. But that same night, the news arrived. Diego had gotten a job at a major developer. It's my opportunity, his excited voice had said over the phone. In a few years I'll come back for you. I promise. Maria Elena never returned that last call. You can't hide it forever. Her mother had warned when her belly started to show. San Miguel has eyes on every corner. It was then that Doña Carmen had appeared at her door one rainy afternoon. I know what you're going through. My little girl. Her mother had embraced her without judgment, without questions. And I have a proposal. The plan was simple in its complexity. Maria Elena would have the baby in Querétaro. Away from prying eyes, Doña Carmen would register her as her adopted daughter. We'll give her your maiden name, Suarez. No one will ask questions. And Diego, my son, is building his future. Someday he will understand. The months passed in a blur of nausea and guilt. Ricardo, the young bank cashier who always looked at her with tender eyes, was the only one who guessed the truth. You're not alone, he told her one afternoon, offering her a handkerchief and a future. The birth was difficult. Lucia was born screaming, with her father's eyes and her mother's determination. Maria Elena could only hold her for a few minutes before they took her away. It's for the best, Doña Carmen insisted while registering the child as her adopted daughter. You'll be able to see her grow, to be close, but without the burden of what people will say. The following years were an elaborate dance of half-truths. Maria Elena married Ricardo, who accepted the arrangement with a nobility she could never repay. Doña Carmen raised Lucia with a fierce love, whispering stories about her brother Diego, the successful businessman. Why doesn't he ever come see me? Lucia had asked as a child. He's busy, my dear, building beautiful hotels like this one. Maria Elena watched from the shadows, being the perfect aunt, the devoted godmother, swallowing back the tears every time Lucia called her aunt instead of mom. Until when? Ricardo had asked at night. Until the time is right, she had answered, without knowing when that time would come. And now, 20 years later, time had caught up with everyone. In the bathroom mirror, Maria Elena saw the first gray hairs that sprinkled her black hair. The same mirror where, once a teenager and terrified, she had seen 2 pink lines change the course of 4 lives. The doorbell rang. It was time for the conversation they should have had 2 decades ago. Come in, she whispered into the intercom. They were waiting for her. Diego and Lucia's footsteps echoed on the stairs while the clock marked the beginning of a new truth. The coffee was cooling in the 3 untouched mugs. Maria Elena had set the dining room table as if for a formal dinner. An unconscious attempt to give structure to a moment that threatened to fall apart. I'll start, Diego said, breaking the dense silence that enveloped them. I deserve to know why. Lucia, sitting between them, kept her gaze fixed on her hands. The resemblance to her father was painfully evident under the light of the ceiling lamp. I was 18 years old. Maria Elena began. Maria Elena, her voice barely a whisper. And you had just left for the capital when I found out, when I knew I was pregnant. Your mother was the first to notice. My mother. Diego let out a bitter laugh. The same one who wrote me weekly letters about the town. About everyone, but never about this. She protected me, she protected us all. Protect us? Lucia raised her gaze for the first time. Do you call living a lie? Growing up wondering why my supposed grandmother cried every time she brushed my hair. Protection? Maria Elena extended her hand across the table. But Lucia pulled away. Your father was building his future. I was a student without resources. And in this town. Stop justifying it. Diego slammed his fist on the table. Do you think money was worth more than knowing my daughter? That hotels compensate for 19 lost years? It wasn't just about you. Maria Elena straightened up. Do you think it was easy watching my daughter grow? Calling me aunt? Pretending that the daily visits were just a courtesy? But Ricardo could be my father. Lucia murmured. Ricardo? Maria Elena broke down. Ricardo was the only one who loved us both unconditionally. A heavy silence followed those words. Outside, the parish bells chimed 9. I have photos, Lucia finally said, taking an envelope out of her bag. From all these years, Abuela Carmen kept a secret album. Every birthday, every Christmas, the three of you are there. You, Mom, and Ricardo, smiling, pretending everything was okay. Diego took the photos with trembling hands. Images of a life that should have been his. Lucia learning to walk. Blowing out candles. Graduating from high school. Look at me, Lucia demanded, facing them both. Look at me and tell me if it was worth it. If all this theater justifies that today. At 19 years old, I have to rewrite my entire story. Maria Elena tried to speak, but the words choked in her throat. I can't change the past. Diego finally said, but I'm here now. If you give me the chance. The chance? Lucia stood up. Like the chance you didn't give Mom to tell you the truth? Or the chance she didn't give me to choose my own story? She headed for the door, but paused for a moment. Abuela Carmen left a letter for me. She said to open it when I knew the truth. I think it's time to read it. But I need to do it alone. The door closed softly behind her, leaving Diego and Maria Elena in a silence charged with 2 decades of regrets. I'm leaving the hotel, Diego announced the following morning. I'll move to my mother's house. Josefina looked at him with concern as he packed his suits into his designer suitcase. The news had spread like wildfire through San Miguel. The prodigal son, the teacher, and the florist, the 3 most respected names in town, caught in a scandal that no one dared to mention out loud. Are you sure, Don Diego? That house has been closed since Doña Carmen. It's time to face the ghosts. Josefina. The Hernandez house on Clock Street remained exactly the same. The garden, once his mother's pride, was now wild and neglected. Diego inserted the key into the rusty lock. The smell of confinement hit him, along with memories. Photographs on the walls of him graduating from college. Maria Elena at her wedding to Ricardo. Lucia in every stage of her life. His mother had meticulously documented the story he never knew how to read. Looking for answers, he turned, startled. Ricardo was at the door in his impeccable bank suit. Did you come to claim anything? I came to deliver this. Ricardo took an envelope out of his briefcase. Your mother gave it to me before she died. For when Diego returns, she said. Why do you? Because I was the only one who had nothing to lose with the truth. Ricardo paused, or so she thought. Diego opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter and a key. In the attic, Ricardo explained. There's a trunk. Your mother saved everything. The ultrasounds. Lucia's first shoes. The letters that Maria Elena never sent you. Why are you telling me this now? Because Lucia deserves to know her whole story. Not just the version that each one wants. Ricardo headed for the door. And Diego, she has your temper. Give her time. Alone in the house, Diego went up to the attic. The trunk was where Ricardo had said. Covered in dust. Inside, his lost life awaited him in fragments of paper and photographs. The first letter he took was from Maria Elena, dated a week after he left. Dear Diego, there's something I need to tell you. It was never sent. The sound of footsteps alerted him. In the attic doorway, Lucia was watching him. Abuela Carmen told me about this place in her letter. She said softly. She said that here we would find the answers that no one dared to give. Father and daughter looked at each other in the dim light of the attic, surrounded by the secrets that a wise woman had kept, waiting for the right moment for the truth to set them all free. Do you want to read them with me? Diego offered. Lucia hesitated for a moment before sitting down next to him on the dusty floor. Start from the beginning, she whispered. I want to know the whole story. The parish clock struck noon as 2 strangers, bound by blood, began to reconstruct 2 decades of silences, one letter at a time. Dear Maria Elena, Diego read aloud, holding a yellowed letter. If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer here to explain my reasons. The last letter from Abuela, Lucia whispered, recognizing the elegant handwriting. The attic smelled of stagnant time and old secrets. The light filtering through the small window created a halo around father and daughter, seated among boxes of memories. When my son left, Diego continued, his voice breaking, I saw in your eyes the same fear I felt when I got pregnant with him. Alone and scared in a town that doesn't forgive. I couldn't allow history to repeat itself. Lucia took another letter from the trunk. This one's yours, Papa. The word Papa sounded strange on her lips. It was dated 3 months after he left. Diego took it with trembling hands. Son, today your daughter kicked for the first time. Maria Elena cried when she felt her. Someday you'll understand why we kept this secret. For now, I can only pray that time proves us right. There are more. Lucia rummaged through the trunk. Dozens of letters. All saved. None sent. They found the first ultrasound attached to a note from Maria Elena. She looks like you. Although the doctor says it's too early to know. Your mother says she'll be a girl. She says she has the same restless spirit you had. Why? Diego's question echoed in the attic. Why save all this if they never planned to tell me? Because Abuela knew that this day would come. Lucia answered, holding up the last letter. Dated a week before Doña Carmen's death. Listen, my dear family. When you find these letters, it will be because the truth has finally caught up with you. Diego, my son, don't blame Maria Elena. Every decision we made was for love. Maria Elena, forgive me for asking you to carry this secret. And Lucia, my child, you are proof that true love finds its way, even if it takes 20 years to do so. The silence that followed was interrupted by footsteps on the stairs. Maria Elena appeared in the doorway, her eyes fixed on the scene in front of her. Ricardo told me you would be here, she whispered. Diego looked up, holding a photograph. Maria Elena pregnant, smiling next to her mother in the garden. We should have trusted me, he finally said. We should have trusted everyone. Maria Elena corrected him, slowly approaching. In you, in us, in the love you had for us. Lucia stood up, holding the letters against her chest. Abuela saved our story, she said softly, every part, as if she knew that someday we would need to rebuild it together. The three of them fell silent, surrounded by 2 decades of love contained on paper and ink, while the afternoon sun painted long shadows in the Hernandez attic, where a wise mother had saved the fragments of her broken family, waiting for the day they could be reunited. You can't pretend that everything is fixed with some old letters. Lucia's voice echoed in the attic. The initial curiosity for the documents had given way to the contained rage of years. Do you know how many times I asked Abuela about my real family? How many times I invented stories about my parents? A thunder rumbled in the distance, like a presage of the storm that was brewing, both outside and inside the house. Lucia, please, Maria Elena began. No, no more. Lucia, please, no more excuses. She turned to Diego. And you, really never suspected anything? Not even when Abuela sent you photos of me in every letter? Diego ran a hand over his face. I thought it was her way of keeping busy after being widowed. An adopted girl to fill the void. A lie. Everything was a lie. Lucia threw the letters on the floor. Ricardo was more of a father than you. At least he chose to stay. Maria Elena took a step forward. It's not fair. Fair? Lucia let out a bitter laugh. Do you want to talk about justice, Mom, or should I keep calling you Tia Maria Elena? Which is more comfortable for you? The rain began to lash the attic roof, creating a frantic melody that accompanied the confrontation. I have letters too, Lucia continued, taking a wrinkled bundle out of her bag. Letters that I wrote every birthday, every Christmas, imagining what my real parents would be like. Do you want to hear them? Without waiting for a response, she unfolded one. Dear Mom and Dad, today I turned 15. Abuela Carmen says I look like someone, but she never says who. Tears began to run down Maria Elena's face. Diego remained still, each word from his daughter like a dagger in his chest. And this one, Lucia pulled out another. Dear Mom and Dad, today Tia Maria Elena came to my graduation. She cried when I received my diploma. I wonder if you would have cried too? Her voice broke. There you both were, watching me grow, pretending to be other people. A lightning flash illuminated the attic, projecting grotesque shadows on the walls. In that instant, the three of them saw their reflections in the window. A family broken by the weight of their own decisions. I only wanted to protect you, Maria Elena whispered. Protect me from what? From love? From the truth? Lucia picked up her bag. Abuela Carmen was the only one who didn't lie to me. She always said that someday I would understand everything. But you know what? I don't want to understand. Not now. She headed for the stairs, pausing for a moment. I need time away from here. Away from everyone. The attic door closed behind her, leaving Diego and Maria Elena in a broken silence, only interrupted by the sound of rain and the contained sobs of a mother who had just lost her daughter for the second time. She went to Guanajuato, Ricardo informed them 3 days later. Entering the flower shop. She's staying with my sister. Maria Elena dropped the scissors she was using to cut stems. The metallic sound against the floor echoed in the silence of the empty shop. Is she okay? She's processing everything, like we all are. Ricardo loosened his tie. Diego came to the bank this morning. What he wanted was to transfer the ownership of the Hotel Valencia. He put it in Lucia's name. The gesture made Maria Elena sit abruptly on the stool behind the counter. Outside, life in San Miguel continued, tourists taking photos, street vendors hawking their wares, as if the world hadn't fractured 3 days ago in an attic full of old letters. I also found this. Ricardo took an envelope out of his briefcase. Lucia left it on my desk at the bank. Maria Elena took the letter with trembling hands. Dear Papa Ricardo, because that's what you've always been to me, even if we don't share the same blood. Forgive me for leaving like this, but I need to understand who I am when all the labels that others put on me are taken away. I love you. Always yours, Lucia. There's one for you too. Ricardo extended another envelope before Maria Elena could open it. The bell on the door jingled. Diego entered, stopping when he saw Ricardo. Go ahead, Ricardo said, heading for the exit. This conversation has been 20 years coming. When they were alone, Diego approached the counter. Did you know that my mother kept a diary? He took out a worn notebook. She wrote about every day since she found out about the pregnancy. Every decision, every doubt. Diego, no, let me finish. There's an entry that keeps going through my mind. Today, I saw my son on television, inaugurating another hotel. Meanwhile, his true fortune is growing in a garden in San Miguel, learning the names of the flowers. Maria Elena opened Lucia's letter, reading aloud. Mom, how strange to call you that after so many years of Tia. Abuela Carmen wrote in her last letter that true love always finds its way. I want to believe her. I need time to forgive you. To forgive myself for being angry. To understand that love sometimes makes imperfect decisions. Don't look for me. I'll be back when my heart weighs less. Lucia. Diego sat down next to her, their shoulders touching lightly. Do you think she'll forgive us someday? I don't know, Maria Elena answered, but she's giving us a chance to try. It's more than we deserve. At the bank, Ricardo kept his own letter in the desk drawer, a sad smile on his lips. Outside, San Miguel was beginning to be painted with the colors of sunset. While 3 broken hearts were learning that forgiveness, like love, also needs time to blossom. I will return all the dowry, Ricardo said, extending the divorce papers on his desk at the bank. The house, the investments. Maria Elena pushed the documents back. You earned it, Ricardo. Every single peso. It was early, before the bank opened its doors. The sun was barely peeking over the colonial rooftops of San Miguel, gilding the windows of the building. 20 years, Maria Elena, he said. They weren't a mistake. No, they weren't. She smiled sadly. They were a gift I didn't deserve. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of the door. Diego entered, his designer suit contrasting with the simplicity of the provincial bank. Sorry, am I interrupting? No, Ricardo stood up. In fact, you arrived right on time. There's something you should know. He took a letter out of his briefcase. It's from Lucia. She says she's ready to see us all. Maria Elena held her breath. 2 weeks had passed since her daughter left for Guanajuato. When? Diego asked. This Sunday, at my sister's house. Ricardo paused, but she has one condition. She wants us all to go together. The 3 of us. The proposal floated in the air like a leaf in autumn, delicate and full of promise. Why the 3 of us? Maria Elena whispered. Because. Diego read the letter Ricardo extended to them. She says we're all part of her story, and she wants to write the next chapter with the complete truth. Ricardo closed his briefcase. The car leaves at 9. It's time for this family, as peculiar as it is, to find its way. Maria Elena looked at the 2 men who had defined her life. One for love, the other for loyalty, both for sacrifice. Family? Diego smiled slightly. I guess we are, in the strangest way possible. Life rarely follows the paths we plan. Ricardo responded, heading for the door. Sometimes it takes detours that turn out to be exactly where we needed to be. They agreed to meet on Sunday at the main plaza. The trip to Guanajuato would be long, but not as long as the journey they had traveled to get to this point. Maria Elena stopped at the bank door. Ricardo, thank you for everything. He nodded once, and in that gesture were contained 20 years of silent love, of chosen fatherhood, of sacrifices made in the name of something bigger than pride or duty. Diego observed the exchange in silence, finally understanding that love has many forms, and that all are valid when they come from the heart. The parish clock struck 8, its chimes echoing in the cobblestone streets of San Miguel, where 3 lives intertwined by destiny were preparing for the next chapter of their shared story. The road to Guanajuato snaked between mountains like the twists and turns that life had taken to bring them to this moment. Ricardo was driving, Maria Elena was in the passenger seat, and Diego observed the landscape from the back, each lost in their own thoughts. Remember the first time Lucia won an art contest? Ricardo broke the silence. She was 12. She painted the parish. Maria Elena smiled. but from the exact angle where Diego used to sit and draw. Blood calls, Diego murmured. My mother always said that. The car passed through a tunnel, emerging into the panoramic view of Guanajuato, the city sprawling like a multicolored tapestry in the valley. Kissing alley, Ricardo indicated, pointing to a narrow street. Your sister lives 2 blocks away. They parked in front of a 2-story blue house. Before they could ring the bell, Lucia opened the door. I saw you arrive, she said simply. She was different. Something in her posture, in the way she looked at them, had matured in these 2 weeks. She led them to a small inner patio where she had arranged 4 chairs around a table. I've been painting. She pointed to several canvases leaning against the wall. They were portraits. Doña Carmen, Maria Elena, Ricardo, Diego, all in different moments of their lives. Created from old photographs. They're beautiful, Maria Elena whispered. Abuela Carmen left one last gift. Lucia took out an envelope. Instructions that it could only be opened when the 4 of us were together. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal. My beloved ones, if you are reading this, it means that you have finally found your way back to each other. Lucia, my child, you have your father's strength and your mother's heart. Maria Elena, my daughter in everything but blood. Your love was greater than your fear. Diego, my little one, sometimes the greatest success lies in what we build with our hearts, not our hands. And Ricardo, the angel God sent us. Your nobility saved us all. The truth hurts, but it also frees. Now you are free to be the family you were always meant to be. Imperfect, complicated, but real. I love you, Carmen. The silence that followed was full of contained tears and unspoken words. I've been thinking, Lucia finally said. I want to keep the Montero last name. It's who I've been all my life. But she looked at Diego too. I also want to know my father. And she turned to Maria Elena. I want to learn to call you Mom. Ricardo got up discreetly. No, Lucia. She stopped him. You stay too. You will always be my dad. The Guanajuato sun filtered through the bougainvillea in the patio, while 4 hearts began to heal. Learning that family doesn't always come in the packages we expect, but is just as valuable when it's built with true love. The flower shop had changed. Where there was once only an old counter, now an elegant display case exhibited sophisticated arrangements. The newly painted sign read, Carmen Flower Shop. Since 1962. Are you sure about this? Diego asked, watching Lucia place the last bouquet in the display. As sure as you are about selling the hotel, she answered, adjusting a lily. 3 months had passed since that meeting in Guanajuato. Time, that great teacher, had begun to smooth the rough edges of their story. Your grandmother would be proud. Maria Elena entered, carrying more flowers. She always said that this place needed your touch. Our touch. Lucia corrected her. We're a team now, aren't we? The bell on the door jingled. Ricardo entered, still in his bank suit, but without the tie that once seemed like a second skin. I came to see how everything turned out. Papa. Lucia went to hug him. The word no longer sounded forced. It had found its natural place in this unconventional family. Ready for tomorrow? He asked. Returning the hug. The reopening of the flower shop would be an important event in San Miguel. Not so much for the business itself, but for what it represented. The public reconciliation of one of its most well-known families. The notary will bring the papers during the ceremony. Diego informed them. The flower shop will officially be in the name of Lucia Montero Hernandez. The new compound last name had been Lucia's idea, a way to honor both her past and her present. Do you think people will talk? Maria Elena asked, more out of habit than real concern. Let them talk. Lucia shrugged. Our story deserves to be told. Diego watched his daughter, recognizing in her the same determination that had led him to leave the town 2 decades earlier. But where he sought fortune, she had found something more valuable, the truth. Your mother, Ricardo began, but then corrected himself. Carmen always said that the best stories are the ones written with the heart. Maria Elena approached the window where the setting sun bathed the flowers in golden tones. She wove this web of love around you, protecting us all, even when she was no longer here. And here we are, Lucia concluded, looking at the 3 of them. A different family, complicated, but ours. The parish clock struck 6. Like that afternoon when Diego returned to town. But this time, the chimes didn't sound like melancholy, but like a promise. Tomorrow, San Miguel de Allende would witness how love, in all its forms, can rebuild what fear had separated. And in the flower shop that bore the name of the woman who had loved them all. 4 hearts beat in unison, finally at peace with their truth. Are you nervous? Diego asked, adjusting his tie in front of the sacristy mirror. A little, Maria Elena admitted, smoothing her white dress, but in the right way. 3 years had passed since the reopening of the flower shop. 3 years of rebuilding bonds, of learning to be a family. of turning secrets into stories that no longer hurt when they were told. The bouquet is ready, Lucia announced, entering with a cascade of white roses and orchids. I made it myself. It's perfect, Maria Elena whispered, taking it with trembling hands. The church of San Miguel was full. It wasn't every day a couple got married who had waited 20 years to say, I do. Ricardo, in the first row, smiled with genuine happiness. Next to him, his new wife, Anna, a teacher from Querétaro, who had come into his life as a second chance. Ready? Lucia offered her arm to Maria Elena. She had insisted on being the one to give her away at the altar. The wedding march began to play. Diego waited at the altar, where so many times they had met as teenagers. But this time, there were no secrets, no fear, only truth and love. We are gathered here today. The priest began. In the front row, on a special cushion, rested a photograph of Doña Carmen, her serene smile presiding over the ceremony as it had presided over their lives. The vows were simple, distilled by years of waiting. I loved you then, I love you now, I will love you always. When the priest declared them husband and wife, the parish bells rang with special joy, as if San Miguel itself were celebrating this circle that was finally closing. At the reception held in the garden of the Hotel Valencia, now transformed into a boutique hotel managed by Lucia, Ricardo raised his glass. To family, he said simply, in all its forms. Lucia danced with her three fathers, first with Ricardo, who had given her his name and his unconditional love, then with Diego, who was learning that fatherhood has no expiration date, and finally with Antonio, her fiancé, a young architect who had come to restore the Hernandez house and had stayed to restore hearts. Maria Elena and Diego slipped away for a moment to the balcony. From there, they could see the entire central plaza, the same stage of their story, but with a different light. You know what I found this morning? Diego took a folded paper out of his jacket. The last page of my mother's diary. True love isn't in a hurry. It knows how to wait. It knows how to forgive. It knows how to rebuild. Like the flowers that Maria Elena and Lucia care for in the shop. It needs time to bloom. But when it does, it is more beautiful than any plan we could have imagined. The sunset painted the San Miguel sky in shades of rose and gold, while a family built with patches of love, pain, and forgiveness celebrated not only a wedding, but the victory of love over fear, of truth over secrets, of hope over the past. And somewhere, Doña Carmen smiled, knowing that her greatest masterpiece had not been the secrets she kept, but the love she planted, watered, and saw bloom, even beyond her time on this earth.